morning, I'm Nancy. Good morning, I'm Nancy Holland. Nice to have you all here in person and on Zoom. We're so delighted this morning to have David Keplinger with us. David has written a poem commissioned by us in honor of our 250th anniversary. The title is Looking Through Your Window. So we're pleased to spend some time with him, and he'll go over the poem and talk about the creation of it. David teaches as a professor at American University, an award-winning author, philosopher, and all-around good guy. I have heard on good authority that students line up to get into his classes at AU. So it's a real privilege to have him with us this morning. David.
So it's nice to have a real audience. Oh, and we have more people coming in. Please join us. Well, I have Leah Johnson to thank for this occasion, because it was through Leah that Dumbarton contacted me and asked me to write a poem that would then be put to music as part of the Voices of Zion presentation. And, you know, there are lots of considerations that come to mind when doing such a thing. First of all, do you write it with your own music in mind? Do you just write a poem that comes to you via, you know, the typical process for me, which doesn't have any kind of melodic quality? It has rhythm and it has meter sometimes not. But there certainly is a sense of how would this sound if it were put to music involved in the creating of it. And then there's a sense of, well, what will the other music sound like, and how could this poem possibly fit in, either in its content, thematically, or you know, melodically. So I decided, with Leah's help, I'm looking at Leah right now. For those of you who are watching this on YouTube later, you're not seeing what I'm seeing, which is a screen with me and Leah just above. So I'm looking at Leah as though she were sitting on the panel with me right now. With a conversation that I had with Leah, I decided that I would just write a poem as I always do, but using the words of the men involved, because the letters that they shared were so moving and so, I guess, appropriate to the occasion. So why don't we get that final poem up? I'll read this first. What I had planned today was to read this piece. Just leave that. Why don't I give everybody a chance to get organized? Because it seems like it seems like yes, the ghosts of Dumbarton have plans to join us too. There's a need for more chairs. So what I had planned today was that I would read this piece that I wrote with no melody in mind, although I did have a sense of a movement among the parts, talk about how it came to be, and then also talk about some other poems that I've written that are similar to this, poems that I wrote in order to put to music, and that have to do with this area within the same year, and within about 500 feet or 1,000 feet of this building, which was a project that I engaged in 10 years ago. So this block seems to be very important to me aesthetically, and that's why it's such a thrill for me to be here today. I have to say, it's just too weird how this block comes back to me again and again and again in my poetry. How's that for, you know,
Yeah.
That'll keep the audience here at least. I don't know about the ghosts, but that'll keep the audience here. So here's Looking Through Your Window. And as you see from the epigraph, this is not included in the music itself, because I got to see some of the sheet music, but I'm telling you now that this is based on the actual words of William Edes in his correspondence with John Hersey, not to be confused with the writer of Hiroshima. in the first years of the Civil War, February 1861 to February 1862. So for those of you who know about the church history, this facility, this building was here in 1849, correct? So this building itself was 12 years old when these letters were being written. And so I found portions of these letters that were written over the course of 1 year and created this sequence of poems that I imagined, would have some kind of melody and refrain attached to them, but I felt like this project would be best served by me if I just stepped away from any kind of control over how it was going to be interpreted by the composer. So I'm going to read this first part, and if it were my own poem, of course, it would be a little repetitive, standing there on the page by itself, but I knew that there was going to be a whole chorus involved. So this is the first part, part A. I'm daily looking for some good news. I'm looking for some good news. I'm looking through my window. You are looking through your window. I'm daily looking for some good news. You are looking for some good news. I am daily looking for some good news. I am looking for some good news. I am looking through my window. You are looking through your window. I am daily looking for some good news. You are looking for some good news. B. Our old men nearly all show they are passing away, that they will soon be done with earth and its cares passing away. All the young men of the church are connected with some company away. They spend most every night talking about fighting Christ and the church. We have fallen away. And then back to the refrain. I am daily looking for some good news. I'm looking for some good news. I'm looking through my window. You are looking through your window. I am daily looking for some good news. You are looking for some good news. And we are in a bad way now that business of all kind has stopped. We cannot get any wheat as our canal is broken down, has stopped. We hear of money 20 times, but any mention of the Savior has stopped. The congregation are so slim, and people's minds all taken up with war. Stop. And then, as an aria, we had a love feast the other night. I think the best one we had in years. We held it in the basement of the church, and it seemed to me that I was filled with the Holy Ghost. I am daily looking for some good news. I'm looking for some good news. I'm looking through my window. You are looking through your window. I am daily looking for some good news. You are looking for some good news. I am daily looking for some good news. I am looking for some good news. I am looking through my window. You are looking through your window. I am daily looking for some good news. You are looking for some good news. All of those words, I mean, except for the repetition of away and stop, all of those words, you could see even the archaic usage, the congregation are, come from William Edes. So I thought that was an interesting challenge to place in the making of the poem. And it's a challenge that I came upon, as I said, 10 years ago, when I was given a copybook that was written by my great-great-grandfather. His name was Isaac P. Anderson. He was a private in the Civil War and fought for the Union. He conscripted in August of 1861 and was with a company down in Virginia on Culpeper Road in that area throughout the year of 1861 and 1862. And on the eve of Second Bull Run, he was in Alexandria, and he was extremely ill with typhoid and what he called painter's colic in a letter that he later wrote. And painter's colic was lead poisoning. He was a sign painter, and through the years of being a sign painter, had ingested so much lead that he had shakes and other kinds of, he had trouble walking, other kinds of physical illnesses that were connected to his occupation. And then with typhoid and with the other problems that he was having, digestive problems during the war, he had to leave. And he got what he called a descriptive from his captain and was sent home with this descriptive. So he got on the trains and went back to Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, where he was from, and back to his life in August of 1862. Got well, and for about a year, he just worked as a sign painter in Phoenixville until the U.S. Army came for him in 1863 in November, arrested him, and brought him back to Washington, D.C. to be tried as a deserter. And where was he kept? In the first weeks that he was here, he was kept around the corner at Forest Hall Military Prison for spies. Do you all know where that is?
No.
It's around the corner. You know Martin's Tavern?
Yeah.
And the Gap? That building that the Gap is in was a military prison for spies called Forest Hall. So I discovered this because I was interested in his life. Once I started reading his copybook, I got very interested in his life and went to the National Archives to see if I could find a couple things on him. And when I gave them his pension information, they came back with a file that thick filled with letters and other kinds of court documents that involved him trying to get out of prison over the next 8 months. And one was a letter that he wrote to his court-appointed attorney, telling exactly what happened to him on August 24th, 1862. And it's a very moving story. He spent 8 months in prison. He went to Stone General Hospital over in Meridian Hill. And he was there for a few months. And it was also at the time that Walt Whitman was going from hospital to hospital, reading to soldiers and nursing them. So there's a good chance that Walt Whitman might have met my great-great-grandfather as one of those soldiers he writes about in Drum Taps. So I wrote these poems that were based on his words 10 years ago, and they appeared in a book called Another City. So I'm just going to read a few of those poems and talk a little bit about the process of writing them and how that is related to the process that I use in writing in the voice of Edes. This is a series called A Young Man's Copybook, 1861 to 1864. Conscription, September 1861. By train we come to Philadelphia. Conductors patrolling for drunkenness, illness, the mad. We are no drunks. We are not ill. We believe with our right minds, we say. Come, they say, and we are greeted by steam, horse breath, curt personnel, small cards that bear the family name, from as far as Chester County to the fortresses of Quaker villages. We come to affix to the rest of our days this service, submission to rank by signature. When we were little children, we would write as children do with pencil tips. We wrote our stories in great loops, each practiced letters, scaled to the size of the thumb. From my shoulder, Jacob read out words, and I pressed down the words. The words were my pressed flowers. The words would flatten as flowers do. The pencil left light markings, easily erased, like everything I touched back then. I did no harm with words. But outstretched like a stinger in my father's fist would be the Cornwall pen. That was my first weapon, unalterable, its strokes. Where is he now, my Jacob, who pressed flowers in the pages of my copybook, whom I reproached for being delicate? Where am I now, who drew broad signs, flags, eagles toting banners in their grip? Where is the train that rocked me out of sleep? and Jacob at the window hollering, the sun almost up. Philadelphia, a field of smoke, hoarse breath, curt personnel, their tents and Protestant plain desks. I've never seen the young more joyous in the world, dressed that morning by our mothers. And this poem is called When Walt Whitman Came to Stone General Hospital, April 1864. So it's an imagined moment in which Whitman and my great-great-grandfather make contact. We muled to him more peaches and a bowl of cream and called him Father Walt. And he then gave a nickel when he had a nickel. And he then fed a strawberry, its hairs like the tongue of a cat on my tongue. On days I would ask, did you bring me the Iliad? And Walt sang, rage be now your song, in a voice that caught and flung against the high-ceilinged warehouse and its walls, falsetto like the sergeant, but as detached as news. The wheels of carriages outside bore mounds of us away, arms, legs, hands, more parts of us cut out into something heavy for the long straight roads where they would burn. Walt Whitman's voice was curvy, full of ruts. He kissed us on the forehead, then on the lips, then on the cheek. And then this is the last section of that poem. After charges of desertion, June 1864. My coat brushed the ground. I was taller in my boots. Maybe my feet weren't touching. My beard the only way. My hair like tippet. On record, I'm a cad, the object of a bounty, rogue escaper from the rough. And fro with his black bags between the offices on Small Street. But the word had dried already. Think of my face, a face, related to my favorite poems, come from those years as well. Emily Dickinson, poems of her life between 1861 and 1865. She was, this taking it all in and letting the language then reflect how it shaped her consciousness that has been how to protest right now as we're having this calm discussion in the church halfway across the world. How do I respond to that? My answer is, I guess I can't help but respond to that. My language is shaped by that. My consciousness is made awake by that, is disturbed by that. Even when I'm not writing about it, it's present in musically, it's present in the diction, it's present in what I choose to look at and what I choose not to look at. So I feel that whatever happened on this block 160 years ago was important for me. It turns out as a poet, I'm just so pleased to have been asked to participate further in other dialogues and conversations that were happening. When I think about William Edes in February 1862, I realized that my own ancestor was only months away from having an experience here that was going to change his life as well. So I feel that there's a personal connection as well as a historical one for me. So maybe we have time to have some questions and some conversations about this project. And if not, I could read more poems, but it's all up to you. And I don't know if there's any questions coming in the chat, but I can also.
I wonder if Leah would like to say a few words, since she's a dear friend and a colleague of yours.
I'll always defer to Leah.
She's halfway around the world. Yeah.
Leah,
I can't hear you, Leah.
we're trying to unmute her. She has to do it herself, but we're asking.
Did that work?
Yes. Hello.
Hello. I'm just really here to listen because I love David's work so much, and I always find it so meaningful. That book that he's holding accompanied me a few years ago before the pandemic across the Atlantic to London, and then from London to Australia. So I'm very familiar with these particular poems. And I'm just so thrilled that he was able to work on this project for us. I knew it was the right match, and I didn't know all the reasons that I do now know, but I knew it was. So thank you,
Lee.
David.
Thank you. Would you, my poem, that long poem?
The window poem?
Or the window poem, this? Yeah, let's do it. Let's return to the source.
May I just say one thing about it?
Yes,
We're
please.
singing in the choir, so
Oh.
I have some idea about, thank you
That's
so much. It's
fantastic to
beautiful.
know. Thank you.
But as you listen, my understanding is that it's so appropriate that you've given voice to William Edes, because the whole opera is about voices of the people who are buried at Mount Zion Cemetery. And this piece is sung by the Dumbarton choir, representing our ancestors as people arrive from the cemetery. There's a procession that will go on in the opera.
Wow.
And this is the song that's sung. And the choir sings the refrain. And there are solo voices that sing the voices that we talk about. Thank you so much.
How did it turn out? I haven't heard it yet.
Well, we don't know quite yet, although in rehearsal it sounds great at your.
Wonderful.
Oh, I was just gonna say that I opened the history book this morning, and you really captured the words, and the history book is so dense that I appreciate you pulling that piece out and making it come alive.
Thank you for noticing that. There was a lot of material. I was given pages and pages and pages of notes from these correspondences or segments from them. But there were certain moments that really stood out, and it came to me very quickly. But it's because William Edes had a poetic quality to his voice, and so it was not hard to find the poetry amidst the everyday account. But I'm just fascinated by what this city was like in those years, especially this neighborhood, what it must have been like to live here and to have every day this news coming in, and to see things being dissolved and ripped apart, and to try to hold the community together at the same time. Question?
Hi, I'm Ellen George. I'm the chair of the 250th Sister Centennial, which I was going to say. And I just thought I'd toss out a little history nugget for you on William Edes' daughter, Margaret. So, not the church historian, that's Mike Beard, but I'm the wannabe church historian. So, William Edes dies right after the Civil War. He leaves his money to his son, who then dies, and then his daughter, Margaret, gets all the money.
Oh.
She is the hostess with the mostess in DC. You can see her on the front page of all the society events, holding her annual teas, her parties, her soirees, coming back from Europe, going to her summer house. Then when she dies in 1916, she leaves about $100,000 for the Edes House for Indigent Widows. And this church used to go carol there.
Wow.
But the board wasn't terribly efficient. They kind of let the indigent widows die out, and so it was financially unsustainable. And then they decided they were going to sell it and just let the ladies die out. They weren't taking anyone in, so it gets sold in 1989 for $3 million to a private buyer. It is now worth $7 million. It's the corner of N and 29. So I was looking for a happy ending for the story. So I'm going to toss this out, see if you like it. So I have this vision of all of these indigent widow ghosts who are now sitting in the solarium, which you can see with their toes in the indoor lap pool, just lapping it up for eternity. So that's Margaret Edes. And she is, I think, one of the better legacies of the Edes story as well. So,
Wow, that's lovely. And you said it's on 29th and N? I'll have to go find it.
I just, I'm
Nancy?
curious, yes, thank you. I'm curious about, you described Edes as having in his correspondence a poetic voice. And one of the things that when you were reading about your great grandfather, that I just felt like I was there and I was having to really remind myself that it was a poem that you had written about it. But my question really is, you had his copybook, in that sense of the poetic voice and of his writing, what, and from your research, what is your sense about like the level of education and how these men sort of came to be able to write like that, which seems, I mean, to me, it seems unusual. I don't know if it is or not, but I'm just curious about what your thoughts are about that.
Thank you for asking, because I forgot to tell you the second part of my story with Isaac. These poems are my own creations. They're my own imaginings of his voice. They are my Spoon River anthology, just like this Voices of Zion project is the voice graveyard. Just I don't know if you're all familiar with Edgar Lee Masters' Spoon River. It's the same idea. So I have this Spoon River anthology as well with Isaac's voice, but they're all my words. However, that copybook was full of poems. Some poems that he had written himself and which he had ascribed to himself, and other poems that were copied in the copybook for him by his school friends, which were famous poems of the day. And I took some of those poems, the famous poems of the day, and some of Isaac's poems, and I wrote an album called By and By, which came out in 2011. If you go to my website, there are a couple of clips from videos that I made of that album, and it's available on Spotify. You can listen to it for free. But it's called By and By, and it's under my name. But all of the words on that album, except, I'm telling you, except for very few, were either written by Isaac or inscribed in his copybook. And I found that to be an excellent challenge because I didn't want to change words in order to fix the music. I wanted the music to rise to where the words were. And Isaac, I can tell you, I don't know anything about Edes' education, but Isaac, I can tell you, had a typical education of a young man in the 1850s in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, which was that he went to his father's school. His father ran a school, later taught in it when he was 15 or 16 years old, and then had no further formal education. He became a sign painter, an artist. He painted murals in the town that until only about 50 years ago still existed. So he was not a very educated man, but he, and as far as I know, he wasn't a great reader because his work didn't reflect knowledge of books. His work reflected knowledge of popular songs and a love for poetry, because he had a knack for writing, in fact, comical poetry. So some of the poems were little sarcastic looks at his family, and others were acrostics based on the names of people in his town. And I just love to putting them to music. I wrote about 15 or 16 songs, and I chose the 11 best and then made the album based on that. So let me read this poem again, now that you have the background information, and thank you for that hint about what's to come. Could we get the poem back on screen? Yeah, thanks, Shirley. Looking through your window. I am daily looking for some good news. I'm looking for some good news. I am looking through my window. You are looking through your window. I am daily looking for some good news. You are looking for some good news. I am daily looking for some good news. I'm looking for some good news. I'm looking through my window. You are looking through your window. I am daily looking for some good news. You are looking for some good news. Our old men nearly all show that they are passing away, that they will soon be done with earth and its cares passing away. All the young men of the church are connected with some company away. They spend most every night talking about fighting. Christ and his church, we have fallen away. I am daily looking for some good news. I am looking for some good news. I am looking through my window. You are looking through your window. I am daily looking for some good news. You are looking for some good news. We are in a bad way now that business of all kind has stopped. We cannot get any wheat as our canal is broken down, has stopped. We hear of money 20 times, but any mention of the Savior has stopped. The congregation are so slim and people's minds all taken up with war. Stop. We had a love feast the other night. I think the best one we had in years. We held it in the basement of the church. And it seemed to me that I was filled with the Holy Ghost. I am daily looking for some good news. I am looking for some good news. I am looking through my window. You are looking through your window. I am daily looking for some good news. You are looking for some good news. I am daily looking for some good news. I'm looking for some good news. I'm looking through my window. You are looking through your window. I am daily looking for some good news. You are looking for some good news. I mean, it's that chorus especially, thank you. That chorus especially is, it still applies. I mean, we were looking for good news. I think that's the beauty of writing in the voices of the past, that you see that their concerns and their trials were, they named different things, but they were the same as ours. So it was a real privilege to be a part of this. How are we doing on time?
Can we hear another poem?
We have time for one more poem.
One more poem? Okay. Well, who was it that sent along those poems that I wrote in the voices from Moravia?
Oh, I
Was
did,
that-
yeah.
was that-
Yes, read that.
Okay, I'll read a couple of those. So this was something that Nancy had attached to the announcement, and it's called Composition for Three Voices, a Tenement in Moravia. This comes from a book called The Long Answer, which came out in 2020. And when I was a young man living in Central Europe in the Czech Republic in the 1990s, I lived in a tenement building that had some very, very elderly folks in it who had distinct memories from World War II. And so these poems are based on little monologues that they shared with me in those years. So this is called Composition for Three Voices, a Tenement in Moravia. First flat, Irena's voice. We have a word that's very difficult. Its parts get backward on the tongue. A word is much to swallow as to say. And when you say it, you will be one of us. Čtvrtek. English, Thursday. Čtvrtek. But you must carve it like tough meat into parts. Why am I alive? During the war, this is difficult to say. Men from another city, it was Havijov, called on my mother every Thursday. Cakes, milk, bread, sometimes a bit of meat or butter, they paid her for their privileges. Čtvrtek was the hardest word, hardest day. I'm alive because I ate the whole meal every Thursday. And here's just the second of the three. Second flat, Ferda's voice. Over the town, the stacks blew a cape made of ashes. Magic shows relying on simple faith. A man cannot be cut in two, sit up and try to walk away. A woman can't just disappear. A tongue cannot be shredded cloth pulled out of the mouth. So elites instruct. The ride into Poland had many stops. They stopped in this town. They stopped over there, and others waved from the platform. They asked for some to step forward. They took our hands sometimes and helped us on the train. They asked us little questions on our hopes and destination. We believed in the trick and stepped into their boxes with the slots where the knives go in. Third flat, Pavel's voice. The dead of winter was the part I played. It was a small role and I never spoke. Sometime in March in 1945, my boots were stolen. With feet as cold as iron, I stood sweeping snow from the tent in the last hours of the world. Where am I? Where am I going? I thought, the snows of wartime passing over my head. If I keep moving, I'll live, so I will not bequeath my iron feet to anyone. Therefore, I have no children, no wife, no flesh to pour this heaviness into. I'm still that shoeless man standing upright with his broom brimmed with ire. But I'm also myself, a softer person. The shoeless man and I are floating on a stage. We lower the broom on each side and row through snow until now. Thank you all. That was a heavy one that I didn't realize as I was reading it. It was very heavy, but in honor of those in Ukraine who are struggling now with the same currents of history, I think it's probably appropriate. And on that note, thank you all.
Thank you. And David, we do have one question that came in by chat. So let me check on this. Wondering if you have seen our book about the Dumbarton windows
Oh,
and the
here, I'm gonna
story,
give it to you.
the stories, okay. Because it has been mentioned by somebody that some of the windows are about the mothers who spent their last pennies to visit their dying sons who were here when this church was a hospital. So.
I know about the book. I haven't seen it, but that hence the reference to the windows in the poem. That was intentional.
Okay, and here you are about to see this book.
Well, David, thank you so much. Let's give him another. As you were reading, I was just thinking, well, listening to you and your work, I do feel sort of renewed to think about living with me. So I really do appreciate that. But we did want to, in our,
Thank you.
our book of the windows, and maybe you'll have some other inspiration.
Thank you.
And David, Ellen has asked me to give you one of our church, what do you call it? Church pitch. So this is the church merch. This is the each window. This is the each window.
Oh, wow.
And so, and my daughter was involved in designing it and getting it out for the church merch.
Thank you. Thank you.
And David, we have finally managed to copy your poem.
Oh, great.
Would you be willing to?
Of course. Of course.
And then I'd like to grab, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you all for this opportunity. I just love being a part of the project and not wait to hear the final product.
Look forward to being in one of the performances.
I will be there at multiple